My name's Darren. Jump in the passenger seat with me as we explore the remote areas and wildlife of Africa. Have you or your family ever owned a vehicle that meant a lot to you? Special places, special times, special memories you've shared. Did she have a name? Perhaps you've also spent a lot of love customising her in a super cool way, like Quinn in Namibia did with her series Landy. For me, my Land Rover Defender has been an amazing friend that I've owned for 22 years through thick and thin, and this film is all about the day I had to abandon her to the river gods of Africa. The day started as usual, with me waking up in the roof tent after another hot and sweaty night. You may remember at the end of the last episode, it was April 2020, and we'd run away to Africa to escape the COVID pandemic, ending up in the most remote corner of Namibia, in the last tiny village of civilization before the vastness of the Skeleton Coast Desert really takes over. Overall, it'd been a pleasant week mucking about with my new camera equipment, hiding away from the sun and the shade of the trees, and relaxing after the whirlwind of emotions around my sudden lifestyle changes. So much so that I have to admit to being a little bit bored and restless this morning. And so I'm thinking of just heading across the river to the shop and picking up a few basic supplies, having a drive on the other side of the river just for something to do really. I think the river's okay. Some people crossed it yesterday, it hasn't come up at all. It's should be fine. So anyway, let's head across to the shop and have a bit of an explore on the other side. As I mentioned there, some locals had been staying and had decided to head home across the river the previous day. After checking out the depth and picking a route across, they hadn't had any problems, so I wasn't expecting any drama in the Landy following in their tracks, especially as the river had gone down a bit overnight. So I lined up their tyre tracks and headed into the water, dreaming of a cold drink on the other side. Okay, so just heading across the river, put it into low range third gear, sounds about right I reckon. Should be okay. Fiddlesticks. That didn't quite go to plan. Oh well, time to get wet and see what's happened, I guess. Overnight, a large hole had developed in the riverbed, which wasn't obvious from the water patterns on the surface. My momentum entering the water meant the front wheel had just managed to push through it, but it took all of my momentum away, so the back wheel sank into the hole and couldn't get out again, grounding the rear axle on the sand. In these first few seconds, I knew straight away that this was a potentially very serious situation, and both the Landy and I were in some danger if we couldn't get out quickly. The riverbed is about 300 metres wide, meaning at times the entire width is covered in water, and we were in the middle of it. Water doesn't normally flow in this river. This was floodwater from recent storms to the north. It was still very much the rainy season, and the catchment area for this river is huge. To add to that, the sand and the mud in the riverbed quickly turns into a terrible clay with just a few drops of water, becoming a thick gunk that's almost impossible to free a vehicle from. And I knew that at any time a huge surge of water could appear, and it would be goodbye to the Landy as it would be smashed by rocks and trees and fill up with water, not to mention if I'd be able to sprint fast enough to safety. The clock really started ticking here to see if I could get the Landy out as quickly as possible. Getting stuck isn't exactly a new experience when you've spent 7 years driving around Africa, covering over 400,000 kilometres and exploring remote regions. We've been stuck in all kinds of bogs, swamps, mud holes and sand traps. I'm quite an adventurous traveller, but usually a very careful driver. When you're alone in very remote places, discretion is always the better part of valour. However, the roads are often terrible, and we are only human, and all overlanders make mistakes. Especially at the end of a long day when we're dehydrated and tired. Or in this case, when locals give bad advice as their English is different to mine. So I'm very well prepared with traction boards and various kinds of jacks to lift the Landy wheels. If you can get the boards under the wheels and have the chassis and axles not touching the ground, you can usually just drive off as they give you enough traction to build up some momentum. I've done this alone numerous times over the years, but equally I've had a lot of fun and help and made some good friends along the way. But the big difference in this situation was, we were in a riverbed full of fast-flowing water. So the first step was to see if I could get the waffle boards under the front wheels so they would give me enough traction to get out. I got stuck quite badly. Sadly, it was pretty obvious pretty quickly that wasn't going to work. I was badly grounded on the back axle and I couldn't get the waffle boards under the wheels enough. So the next step was to see if anybody was around who could help me. Luckily, Chip's son from the campsite heard my toots of distress and turned up to help, which is a great moral boost to know I wasn't alone anymore. Okay, plan B, and time to get serious. I'm going to use the high lift jack to lift up the front of the Landy, get the waffle boards underneath to get some grip, and then drive off. Yeah, I tried to drive up. However, we noticed that the water level was now rising, so much so that the exhaust was now under the water, and I really started to get a sinking feeling in my stomach that this might be the day that I lost my Landy. I have to keep digging. Because the tank is stuck. The biggest issue was that the water was full of sand and silt. As fast as the two of us could dig out one or two wheels, or maybe even the axle, the other ones would fill up even faster. She was a huge obstacle in the fast-flowing water, and trapped everything passing under her. In other words, she was becoming more stuck with every passing minute. The high lift jack proved useless. The axle and now chassis were grounded, and getting grip to the wheels with the waffle boards proved fruitless. So, feeling like a bit of an idiot. Just crossed in the same place yesterday that some people drove across very easily. I guess overnight more sand came. It's very soft up to sort of knee-height sand. So got beautifully stuck. So my stupid fault really. Happens sometimes. Oh well, not much I can do. While busy in the river, my mind was starting to get flashes of all the things we'd been through over the last 20 years. When I ended up with nowhere to stay and so had slept in here on the streets of London, the holidays, the fun, the romances, the over 70 countries we'd been to, the roads that we'd travelled, the people that we'd met, but also the huge amount of money spent and the incredible time I'd invested in her. To rebuild another Landy would take years, and I love my Landy, my incredibly faithful companion and workhorse for the last 20 years. I'm so amazed at what she has put up with over the years, and I wanted her out of here as soon as possible. It's hard work because as soon as you dig one wheel, you go to do the other, the water brings more sand because it's a barrier so it catches. So it's a bit of a pointless game. Luckily, there was a weak phone signal here. We tried calling everybody local who might have a vehicle. Hang on, start again. 081. But communication was difficult in the water, and with the need to keep digging or trying new options. In the end, we decided it would be quicker to run the 3 kilometres back to Puros and try and get a vehicle that way. Calls just weren't working. From your position in the passenger seat, you might be thinking that if I'd gone faster, then I'd been able to power through the hole. However, this goes against my ethos of using the minimum speed and power to get through, as then you retain more control over the vehicle and usually do less damage to it. A few times when I've had to use the damn it, foot to the floor, maximum speed approach, it hasn't gone well, as you may get through the obstacle, but you can end up spitting out the other side like a bat out of hell in an uncontrolled fashion. Bang! Ultimately, if I'd bothered to get my feet wet and walked across the route rather than assuming it was the same as a few hours ago, I'd have saved all this trouble. So tried jacking up the front with high lift jack. We've got the waffle boards underneath, but we couldn't drive out. Jacking up the back is pretty hard, it's pretty sunk, it's very soft sand for the jack, and it's quite heavy. So really do need this vehicle to turn up soon and pull us out. Some of the friendly villagers arrived to help, which was hugely appreciated, and they brought the great news that a vehicle might be on its way. It was obvious that our only real chance of getting out was for a vehicle to pull us. A ray of hope at last, so I started to collect my various tow ropes to see how far they would stretch across the river, as we didn't want the rescue vehicle also getting stuck. Brilliantly, I had decided to get stuck in a river just 3 kilometres from the only village within a 100-kilometre radius. However, it's not exactly the kind of place where everyone owns a Mercedes. Vehicles are few and far around here, and fuel very precious. Now it was a case of waiting and hoping a vehicle was able to be found, and was faster than new floodwater to turn up. Waiting on a Land Cruiser from Puros to come. It come 20 minutes ago, so it's a bit of a nerve-wracking wait. Hopefully it's a case of just pulling us straight out. If I've got enough power. Got a tow rope that almost reaches to the other side. Like a mirage appearing out of the desert, a vehicle turned up full of people who obviously weren't seeing their first vehicle stuck in this river, and it was action stations all round. It was a brilliant feeling to have so much help arrive all at once. At this point I'd been stuck for about 4 hours, and my focus had been on getting out, so I hadn't really noticed that one by one my camera batteries started to die. This was actually the last shot taken, all hooked up to the rescue vehicle and about to be pulled out. At last. But strangely, it couldn't pull me out. It seemed low on power or something. It's not uncommon for vehicles up here to have issues, meaning they aren't operating to full capacity. Maybe a broken differential, so it's a 2-wheel drive instead of a 4-wheel drive. But for whatever reason, and after multiple attempts with everyone pushing from behind, it still couldn't budge me. Eventually it unhitched itself and drove off, and I wasn't quite sure what was happening. Everybody piled in with the high lift jacks and waffle boards, and I can't thank them enough for turning up and their efforts to help us. But it all proved futile. We were super stuck and going nowhere without a rescue vehicle. The terrible tight feeling in my stomach got even worse. Surely, after all the efforts to run away to Namibia, escape the pandemic, fix the Landy, and escape up here, I wasn't going to lose my home and transport over the silly desire for a cold drink. How was I going to travel around without her?